Hello people, it is your boy Twain. I'm back again with another video. If you're new to this series and new to the channel, this series is called Building DanceBuddy, where I'm building a mobile application for dancers and documenting my whole journey from doing it. That's from the beginning of conceptualization of the application and what it's going to do, all the way through to fully fledged SaaS and potentially some marketing as well. So if you like this type of content, please consider liking the video, sharing it, commenting down below, and subscribing to the channel. I would really appreciate that. And let's get into today's update. All right, so a lot has changed in my application, as you can see from the screen, right? I have implemented an authentication flow. That's what I've spent the last few weeks working on. And I've also added a couple of more additional features that I'm actually quite excited about. So the main part of this video is going to be talking about the authentication flow, how I implemented that, and also some of the pros and cons of the way I chose to do this. So you can see on screen now when let me actually reload the application, reloading that, and there you go. The user gets directed to the sign-in screen, right? They are able to sign in if they have an account. If they don't, then they can click on this register button and it takes them to the register kind of side of the same screen. By registering, the screen is linked up to Firebase authentication. So you register an email, password, authenticate that, and a user gets created in Firebase authentication, that backend service essentially. So let's go to the sign-in flow. There's also the forgotten password flow, which is awesome. Very simple. You enter your email and you get sent a reset link for the password, essentially, and that's how it works. So let's go back and let's just sign in to the application. And so I've created an account, just a test account. When I click on the sign in button, it loads up and it then takes you into the application itself. So let's talk a little bit about this authentication stuff. So how did I implement this? My folder structure, my project structure, architecture, I have everything split up into feature-based files, basically. So we have this authentication file project directory, essentially, right? The actual login screen. So you can see the actual logo that you saw at the beginning there. Then we have this sign in, depending on if they're already signed in, or if they clicked on the sign in button. If they're not, then it's the register part, and then they can sign in. Now, the main part that I wanted to discuss is that I use a library to do this. So if I go into my pubspec.yaml, I use Firebase UI auth, right? And I can just show you this here. So it's a Flutter library, essentially, that was published by Google, by Flutter team themselves, that essentially has a bunch of widgets, basically the UI that you just saw, and is automatically integrated with Firebase authentication, which was amazing, right? I started working on the authentication flow, realized halfway through that it's actually quite complicated. There's a lot of things that you have to think about. So you basically, the general flow is you want to be able to sign in the user, has to be linked up with authentication. The user needs to be able to register, right? If there's a new user, they need to be able to register. Probably you want to have some kind of registration process that allows them to register with like Google or Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Then there is the forgotten password flow as well. If they forget their password, you need to be able to allow the user to reset their password. And what else is there? I think that's actually about it. And then obviously they equally need to be able to sign up. There's quite a lot of different things to think about and different parts UI-wise as well to think about how you're going to set up your sign-in page, register page, your forgotten password flow, etc. Now, using the library simplifies all of that for me because they basically did it all for me, literally. So all I had to do was use the library, and then I created my login screen where I then make use of this widget that is part of the library, right? So this sign-in screen here comes from sign-in screen, the Flutter Firebase UI library. Now, with using pre-made components from libraries, obviously the massive pro, obviously for me, was it was much easier and quicker to implement, right? I'm building the application from scratch, essentially. And even though I'm using it as an opportunity to learn, the authentication flow is quite complicated. And for me personally, the part of it that I find most difficult oftentimes is the UI part, the design part. So depending on your design skills, having like a pre-made library might be exactly what you're looking for. But that's the pro, right? You've got this easier and quicker to implement pre-made widget for you that you're able to use. And in this case, it was also already integrated with Firebase authentication. So I had confidence that it was going to work properly. The other pro is that, as I mentioned, there's quite a few parts to the authentication flow. By using like a pre-made library to take care of that for you, to kind of abstract that from you, it also makes sure that you don't miss something important, right? I could have implemented the sign-in screen registration flow and forgotten to add the flow for forgotten password, or sending a reset link, or not tested that properly, etc. So using a pre-made library, components, etc., it ensures that you don't miss certain things most of the time, right? Especially if the library is popular or if it's made by the official Flutter dev team, you can be confident that it's not going to miss certain things. And then the other thing, for me especially, is that the UI actually looks decent, right? It gives you a few customization options, but all in all, it looks pretty good. It looks okay from my standpoint anyway. Now that is depending on your design skills as well and the time that you have to put into this. But if you're a really good designer in terms of you know what looks good and you have a certain funky looking sign-in screen and registration flow that you want to implement, then fair. This Firebase UI or widget library probably doesn't look that great, very basic, very simple. But for me, who's not the best designer, I would say, definitely something I need to work on, it looks okay and it does the job, right? Now, talk about the cons. Personally, I've already found that there is, obviously, if the library isn't one that is trustworthy, because I tried a few different ones in terms of just UI libraries, having the UIs, it might be missing some functionality. It might be missing certain screens. It might, for example, the library that you're using might offer you and give you all the registration screens, the sign-in screen, but then has nothing for the forgotten password screen, right? And because it doesn't have that, you might have to create it yourself, and then there might be a mismatch in that flow. So that is a potential downfall, potential danger, or there might be missing functionality equally with the sign-in, with the password, etc. The other thing is that if you're using a pre-made library, pre-made components, you actually miss out on the learning. So I did a lot of work initially, and I can show you this, to set up my authentication repository and my services, authentication service, as well as my model for the actual model. So my repository with all the methods I need, etc., etc. And because I've used this pre-made library, I actually end up, this is all garbage, basically. I'm not actually using any of this code because it's all baked into the Firebase UI or library itself. So I'm not using any of my services, my authentication repository or services that I actually spent time working on. So I am missing out on that learning on implementing it. So I did write the code, but I'm not using it. I'm also missing out on how do you design a UI screen? What makes a good login screen, right? How do you design that UI? What makes a good login screen? What makes a good registration flow? A good forgotten password flow? Is there different ways you can implement the authentication with Google, etc.? So you're missing out on that learning by using pre-made components or widgets, etc. But you have that trade-off. And then the last thing is that I mentioned earlier as well, the UI might not be exactly what you want. There's limited customization options, especially with this Firebase UI that I'm using, right? It's quite simple. If I go into the sign out screen, for example, I don't love this. I don't really want to have this email not verified part here, where they can dismiss this for some reason and then it doesn't do anything. I don't like the part where it allows the user to just sign out and delete their account immediately. I would rather have it somewhere hidden, right, where it's not in your face like that. There's limited customization options with some of these libraries and pre-made components that you're going to be using. So you might not get exactly what you want. You might have to play around with it a little bit, and it might just not work for you. And in that case, the best option then is to basically just do it yourself, right? So that's the plan for me, actually. My plan is I have initially started with this authentication flow, grabbed it from the Firebase UI library, put it into my application. Works really well, fantastic. But my plan now, and a bit later actually, is to use this all flow for a bit, and then I'm going to create my own authentication flow, mainly because I want to learn. I want to learn about creating good designs and UI for it. I want to learn about actually implementing the backend functionality of signing out, signing in, checking the authentication state, and then doing different actions, etc., etc. That's the plan for me, but that is kind of the biggest change that has come to my application. There's no more anonymous sign-in automatic into my app. Users now have to authenticate. If they're not authenticated, they're redirected to the login screen where they have to log in or sign up, basically. Now, let me show you how I have implemented the authentication handling, right? The routing, let's say. So in my router, this is the base route essentially, yeah. And what it does, it sends the application to this authentication gate. Now, this architecture I've grabbed straight from the Firebase UI auth examples, so it's not something I created myself, but I think it works quite well. So what this does, this auth gate, essentially what it does, it just checks the authentication state, and then if the user is authenticated, they get if they're not authenticated, they get redirected to the login screen, and if they are, they get redirected to the home screen. Very simple, but it works extremely well because I can just, if I go back to my router, what I can do is every time I want to, for example, check if they're authenticated, I just send them here, right? And do a context.go to /. And what that then does is it sends them to authentication gate, checks if they're signed in, redirects them to the login screen if not, and redirects them to the home screen if they are. The login screen, as I told you already, it's just essentially building a little bit on the sign-in screen. So we have providers, and this is all part of the UI provided by the Firebase UI, part of the method. So there's a little bit of authentication, a little bit of customization that you can do with the actual sign-in screen provided by Firebase UI auth. And that's what I've done, basically. So the UI flow is in there now. You can also see there's the sign out that comes as part of it. So at the bottom here, I've implemented the proper indexing to be able to change screen. So you can go to home screen, you can go to the profile screen. Here you can delete your account, which I don't really want directly here for the user to use, but whatever. They can sign out. If I sign out, then I get redirected back to the login screen. There's this verification, which I don't love at the moment. This top bar profile icon at the top, I've added myself. Ideally, I want something more like this, right? The user can go to their account settings and then sign out. But anyway, this is something that I've added just for now, and it's going to be worked on a bit later. And yeah, that's what it is with the authentication flow. Main screen still looks pretty much the same with DanceBuddy at the top. They can that. Another thing I've added is the swipe to dismiss, right? I can swipe and delete something. At the moment, this doesn't work for folders. It only works for actual files, so it's still something to work on. So if I just go in here, I can dismiss, and look at that, right? The file's been deleted. You see this weird double back button, a couple of bugs still to fix. And another major functionality, and last thing I'll talk about right now, is my upload, right? The main action of the application. Just as a reminder, this app is essentially a video library of dance moves. That's the whole basis of this application. So that you don't forget your dance moves again, you have a reference, you have them sorted into specific folders, and you know where they are, you can find them, and it might prompt you to give you prompts as to, hey, have you done this move in a while? Or you want to maybe update this move, try it again, etc., etc. The video library, that's the main basis of the application. So the main action is to upload videos and to create folders. So that's what you can do by clicking on this button, right? The main upload button, it takes you there. But previously, it used to take you to a separate upload screen. I've done away with that screen, and I now have just like a bottom sheet upload menu sort of thing, right? I thought it's better to do this because it's a bit more accessible. It means the user isn't redirected to a whole nother screen to do their action. It's a bit easier to do. From here, same functionality. They can pick from their gallery and select a bit file, right? Eventually, they can only select a video file. They give them a message that the file's been selected. UI still to be improved, definitely. Give it a title, let's say salsa move, or let's say call it a two-step. And then we can upload this. Click on the upload, it loads up, loads and loads, and then it uploads and refreshes the home page. And we've got this 2-step added here and a little snack bar as well, right? Amazing. And then the other action they can do is they can create this folder. As you can see here, if I have nothing typed into the video title, the upload button is blanked out or disabled, and then there, now it's enabled, which is great. They can also create a new folder. Click on that, we get the folder menu. This is the same as what was there previously, same as the upload. If they don't have anything into the folder name, there's nothing there. Let's call this folder, oh, let's call this breaking moves, and in the root, and this brings up all the folders that you have, and you can create. It loads and loads and loads, gets rid of, and once it finishes, which is when, okay, there's definitely a bug here. I'm probably not updating the loading state, which I should do for sure. I will fix that later. We'll go back to this. But anyways, it has created the folder breaking moves in here and reloaded the page. So it's major bit of functionality change, bit of a UI change. Definitely need to still work on the UI in general. The app has looked like this for a long while and it doesn't actually look great. That's something to work on. Clearly you saw a bug there as well, so that's something I need to fix. And then I need to also work out how I'm gonna take care of this profile settings account screen, which at the moment I'm not a huge fan of. Right? It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't look great, but it's something to work on as well. But yeah, that's the update for today. There's been some massive progress essentially in my building of this application. I'm getting towards the part of actually working on the UI parts of things, making it look a lot nicer, making it look a lot more presentable. And then we're gonna go to basically that will be the MVP of the app. And then I'm gonna have a think about launch or talking to some people about potentially using the app. I need to set up some different emulators as well. I want to see what the app looks like, not just on iOS, but also on Android and how it works, and get it on my phone specifically as well, etc., etc. So a whole bunch of stuff to do. We're making progress every day. We're working on the application. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me. As I mentioned at the beginning, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. I want to gain a few more subscribers and get some more traction in the videos, I guess. But yeah, leave a comment as well if there's anything that you think I might need to think about, or if you just like the video in general, engage a little bit, all that stuff. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.